Shalom, Ashvika. I pray all is well and that these readings have been a blessing to you. The previous 45 chapters of the Cepher of Yashar, or the book of Jasher. And put in the comments below, what have been your takeaways? Has there been anything that you've applied to your life? Did you have the opportunity to go back to the playlist and re-listen to or watch for the first time the testaments of any of the patriarchs that I had mentioned from the last reading I did, chapters 41 to 45? If so, post it in the comments. Today we're going to pick up with chapter 46 through 50. I'm really excited because the book of Yashar, the Cepher of Yashar, is just so rich with details that we don't get in, let's say, for example, in the book of Genesis or the Cepher of Bereshit. And as you can see, there's a lot of supernatural things that are going on. And also, we're dealing with things that we deal with now. May look just a little different, but they're still there. Whether it's jealousy, whether it's hatred, bitterness, envy, murder. It's there, and that's what we dealt with this previous chapter. Even with lust, same thing, just various sin. And that's also, with me starting reading the book of Yashar, is because we need examples of what it looks like to walk in truth, to walk with Yahuwah every day. And when his word tells us in the Old Covenant or the Renewed Covenant, Yahuwah says to us, if you love me, walk in my ways. Love isn't an emotion. It's not how somebody makes you feel. That's the lie. From the pit of hell, it's a lie. Love is how you show someone. It's action. That's what I'm trying to say. Yahuwah shows us he loves us with his actions, whether it's for protecting us. We think about no weapon formed against you shall prosper. If any tongue that rises against you, you shall condemn. His word says that in Yashayahu or Isaiah 54 as an example. He gives us provision. He takes care of us. He watches over us. He's left us his word. Our forefathers, they heard all this, this truth oracally. It was just spoken to them. And that's how their faith increased, by the what? The hearing of the word. And that's how I pray your faith, your amunah, is increasing by the hearing of the word as you listen to me read. Hallelujah. So if you're new to this channel, you can find the previous chapters under the playlist. All you have to do is look for the Cepher of Yashar, amongst other books that I've read since I started the channel, to read in between these posts. And those of you that have, that have been part of the channel, that have been part of the community, the family, the mashpaka, I just thank you for your continued support and just accountability, and just being that iron sharpening iron with me, that we are growing together in this walk of truth and showing Yahuwah that we love him by walking in his ways, because we're being diligent by renewing our minds daily. And we're choosing not to be conformed to this world, but transformed by the renewing of our minds, that we may know his good and acceptable will for our lives. And this is how we do it. Not only we walk in his truth, but our walk is more important than our words. Our friends, our family members, people that people we work with, or people that we interact with on a regular basis that have not woken up to truth, they're watching us. It's not what we say. Here's what scripture says about this. If you're pointing out a sin. But it's about how we're living. Are we living according to what we are preaching? And if we're, and if it's not matching up, it's not a win. The way we share the Besorah, the good news, is with our walk. Not only we share it verbally, but we got to walk it out. And that is why, with renewing our minds and just even coming before Abba and repenting for our sins daily, it's just not a one and done, but daily, and even the sins that we haven't repented, to ask Yahuwah in our prayers, if there's any sins that I have not repented for, bring it to the forefront of my mind so I can repent. And also, that's where accountability and community comes into play, where you have others, there's not many, but others that you're walking with, that you can share your trials, share your struggles and your wins and truth. That that there's that accountability to walk in it and to stay in the walk versus falling back and going back to your old habits, your old ways, your old sin. And as the word tells you, I can't think of it at the moment, but it's just it's like being a sow going back and getting back into muddy water, or a dog eating their own vomit. When Yahuwah gives you knowledge of the truth, you're supposed to turn from evil. You're supposed to come out of all that. And that's the point of all this. So we're having examples through the Cepher of Yashar of what it looks like to live an upright life, to walk with Yahuwah. And we see the benefits of walking with Yahuwah because there's protection with that. We can see in the last how many chapters that Yahuwah has bestowed supernatural strength on our forefathers to fight against the Canaanite or the Canaanites. And even with Joseph, you'll see over time how Yahuwah moves in his life through the book of Yashar. So with that being said, there's just a lot of gems for us. And I just pray that you are taking those gems and just holding them so tight and choosing to walk with Yahuwah every day, and to thank Yahusha for making the ultimate sacrifice for your sins, to die for you, die the death that you could never have done for anyone, and living the life that, to be that example that we can read about and we can meditate on. Hallelujah. And sending us the Ruach HaKodesh, because the word does tell us the Ruach was sent to teach us, that no one would have to teach us, but the Ruach would do that. The Ruach HaKodesh, or the Holy Spirit, if you don't know what the Ruach HaKodesh is Hebrew. Now, without further ado, if you haven't already, grab your Cepher, Hallelujah scriptures, Yah scriptures, or whatever you use to follow along. And also grab your notebook and a pen to take notes, so you have something to go back and look at and meditate on. Now let's get started. Chapter 46. In those days, Joseph was still confined in the prison house in the land of Mizraim. At that time, the attendants of Pharaoh were standing before him, the chief of butlers and the chief of the bakers, which belonged to the king of Mizraim. And the butler took wine and placed it before the king to drink, and the baker placed bread before the king to eat. And the king drank of the wine and ate of the bread, he and his servants and ministers that ate at the king's table. And while they were eating and drinking, the butler and the baker remained there. And Pharaoh's ministers found many flies in the wine, which the butler had brought, and stones of niter were found in the baker's bread. And the captain of the guard placed Joseph as an attendant on Pharaoh's officers. And Pharaoh's officers were in confinement 1 year. At the end of the year, they both dreamed dreams in one night, in the place of confinement where they were. And in the morning Joseph came to them to attend upon them as usual. And he saw them, and behold, their countenances were dejected and sad. And Joseph asked them, Why are your countenances sad and dejected this day? And they said unto him, We dreamed a dream, and there is no one to interpret it. And Joseph said unto them, Relate, I pray you, your dream unto me, and Yahuwah shall give you an answer of peace, as you desire. And the butler related his dream unto Joseph, and he said, I saw in my dream, and behold, a large vine was before me, and upon that vine I saw 3 branches. And the vine speedily blossomed and reached a great height, and its clusters were ripened and became grapes. And I took the grapes and pressed them in a cup, and placed it in Pharaoh's hand, and he drank. And Joseph said unto him, 3 branches that were upon the vine are 3 days. Yet within 3 days the king will order you to be brought out, and he will restore you to your office, and you shall give the king his wine to drink as at first when you were his butler. But let me find favor in your sight, that you shall remember me to Pharaoh when it will be well with you, and do kindness unto me, and get me brought forth from this prison. For I was stolen away from the land of Canaan, and was sold for a slave in this place. And also that which was told you concerning my Adonai's woman is false, for they placed me in this dungeon for naught. And the butler answered Joseph, saying, If the king deals well with me as at first, as you last interpreted to me, I will do all that you desire, and get you brought out of this dungeon. And the baker, seeing that Joseph had accurately interpreted the butler's dream, also approached and related the whole of his dream to Joseph. And he said unto him, In my dream I saw, and behold, 3 baskets upon my head. And I looked, and behold, there were in the uttermost basket all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh. And behold, the birds were eating them from off my head. And Joseph said unto him, The 3 baskets which you did see are 3 days. Yet within 3 days Pharaoh will take off your head, and hang you upon a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from off you, as you saw in your dream. In those days the queen was about to be delivered, and upon that day she bore a son unto the king of Mitzrayim. And they proclaimed that the king had gotten his firstborn son. And all the people of Mitzrayim, together with the officers and servants of Pharaoh, rejoiced greatly. And upon the 3rd day of his birth, Pharaoh made a feast for his officers and servants, for the hosts of the land of Zoar and of the land of Mitzrayim. And all the people of Mitzrayim and the servants of Pharaoh came to eat and drink with the king at the feast of his son, and to rejoice at the king's rejoicing. And all the officers of the king and his servants were rejoicing at the time for 8 days at the feast. And they made merry with all sorts of musical instruments, with timbrels, and with dances in the king's house for 8 days. And the butler to whom Joseph had interpreted his dream forgot Joseph, and he did not mention him to the king as he had promised. For this thing was from Yahuwah, in order to punish Joseph, because he had trusted in man. And Joseph remained after this in the prison house 2 years, until he had completed 12 years. Chapter 47. And Yashar the son of Abraham was still living in those days in the land of Canaan. And he was very aged, 180 years old. And Esau his son, the brother of Yaakov, was in the land of Edom, and he and his sons had possessions in it amongst the children of Seir. And Esau heard that his father's time was drawing near to die, and he and his sons and household came unto the land of Canaan, unto his father's house. And Yaakov and his sons went forth from the place where they dwelt in Chevron. And they all came to their father Yashar, and they found Esau and his sons in the tent. And Yaakov and his sons sat before his father Yashar, and Yaakov was still mourning for his son Joseph. And Yashar said unto Yaakov, Bring me hither your sons, and I will bless them. And Yaakov brought his 11 children before his father Yashar. And Yashar placed his hands upon all the sons of Yaakov, and he took hold of them, and embraced them, and kissed them one by one. And Yashar blessed them on that day, and he said unto them, May Yahuwah of your fathers bless you, and increase your seed like the stars of heaven for number. And Yashar also blessed the sons of Esau, saying, May Yahuwah cause you to be a dread and a terror to all that will behold you, and to all your enemies. And Yashar called Yaakov and his sons, and they came and sat before Yashar. And Yashar said unto Yaakov, Yahuwah of the whole earth said to me, Unto your seed will I give this land for an inheritance, if your children guard my statutes and my ways. And I will perform unto them the oath which I swore unto your father Abraham. Now therefore, my son, teach your children and your children's children to fear Yahuwah, and to go in the good way which will please Yahuwah. For if you guard the ways of Yahuwah and his statutes, Yahuwah will also guard unto you his covenant with Abraham, and will dwell well with you and your seed all the days. And when Yashar had finished commanding Yaakov and his children, he gave up his ruach and died, and was gathered unto his people. And Yaakov and Esau fell upon the face of their father Yashar, and they wept. And Yashar was 180 years old when he died in the land of Canaan, in Hebron, and his sons carried him to the cave of Machpelah, which Abraham had bought from the children of Keth for a possession of a burial place. And all the kings of the land of Canaan went with Yaakov and Esau to bury Yashar, and all the kings of Canaan showed Yashar great honor at his death. And the sons of Yaakov and the sons of Esau went barefooted round about, walking and lamenting, until they reached Kiryat Arba. And Yaakov and Esau buried their father Yashar in the cave of Machpelah, which is in Kiryat Arba in Hebron, and they buried him with very great honor, as at the funeral of kings. And Yaakov and his sons, and Esau and his sons, and all the kings of Canaan made a great and heavy mourning, and they buried him and mourned for him many days. And at the death of Yashar, he left his cattle and his possessions and all belonging to him to his sons. And Esau said unto Yaakov, Behold, I pray you, all that our father has left, we will divide it in 2 parts, and I will have the choice. And Yaakov said, We will do so. And Yaakov took all that Yashar had left in the land of Canaan, the cattle and the property, and he placed them in 2 parts before Esau and his sons. And he said unto Esau, Behold, all this is before you. Choose you unto yourself the half which you will take. And Yaakov said unto Esau, Hear you, I pray you, what I will speak unto you, saying, Yahuwah of heaven and earth spoke unto our fathers, Abraham and Yashar, saying, Unto your seed will I give this land for an inheritance forever. Now therefore, all that our father has left is before you, and behold, all the land is before you. Choose you from them what you desire. If you desire the whole land, take it for you and your children forever, and I will take these riches. And if you desire the riches, take it unto you, and I will take this land for me and my children to inherit forever. And Nebaioth the son of Ishmael was then in the land with his children. And Esau went on that day and consulted with him, saying, Thus has Yaakov spoken unto me, and thus has he answered me. Now give your advice, and we will hear. And Nebaioth said, What is this that Yaakov has spoken unto you? Behold, all the children of Canaan are dwelling securely in their land. And Yaakov says he will inherit it with his seed all the days. Go now, therefore, take all your father's riches, and leave Yaakov your brother in the land, as he has spoken. And Esau rose up and returned to Yaakov, and did all that Nebaioth the son of Ishmael had advised. And Esau took all the riches that Yashar had left, the souls, the beasts, the cattle, and the property, and all the riches. He gave nothing to his brother Yaakov. And Yaakov took all the land of Canaan, from the brook of Mizraim unto the river Perath, and he took it for an everlasting possession, and for his children, and for his seed after him forever. And Yaakov took from his brother Esau the cave of Machpelah, which is in Hebron, which Abraham had bought from Ephron for a possession of a burial place for him and his seed forever. And Yaakov wrote all these things in the Cepher of purchase, and he signed it. And he testified all this with 4 faithful witnesses. And these are the words which Yaakov wrote in the Cepher, saying, the land of Canaan and all the cities of the Kittim, the Kavim, the Uvasim, the Emarim, the Perizim, the Girgashim, all the 7 nations from the river of Mithraim unto the river of Parath. And the city of Kevron, Kiryat Arba, and the cave which was in it. And the whole did Yaakov buy from his brother Esau for value, for a possession, and for an inheritance for his seed after him forever. And Yaakov took the Cepher purchase, and the signature, the command, and the statutes, and the revealed Cepher, and he placed them in an earthen vessel, in order that they should remain for a long time, and he delivered them into the hands of his children. Esau took all that his father had left him after his death from his brother Yaakov, and he took all the property, from man and beasts, camel and ass, ox and lamb, silver and gold, stones and bdellium, and all the riches which had belonged to Yashar, the son of Abraham. There was nothing left which Esau did not take unto himself from all that Yashar had left after his death. And Esau took all this, and he and his children went home to the land of Seir, the Kori, away from his brother Yaakov and his children. And Esau had possessions amongst the children of Seir, and Esau returned not to the land of Canaan from that day forward. And the whole land of Canaan became an inheritance to the children of Yasharel for an everlasting inheritance. And Esau with all his children inherited the mountain of Seir. Chapter 48. In those days, after the death of Yashar, Yahuwah commanded and caused a famine upon the whole earth. At that time Pharaoh king of Mithraim was sitting upon his throne in the land of Mithraim, and lay in his bed and dreamed dreams. And Pharaoh saw in his dream that he was standing by the side of the river of Mithraim. And while he was standing, he saw, and behold, 7 fat-fleshed and well-favored kine came up out of the river. And the 7 other kine, lean-fleshed and ill-favored, came up after them. And the 7 ill-favored ones swallowed up the well-favored ones. And still their appearance was ill as at first. And he awoke, and he slept again, and dreamed a second time. And he saw, and behold, 7 ears of grain came up upon one stalk, rank and good, and 7 thin ears, blasted with the east wind, spring up after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the full ones, and Pharaoh awoke out of his dream. And in the morning the king remembered his dreams, and his ruach was sadly troubled on account of his dreams. And the king hastened and sent and called for all the magicians of Mithraim and the wise men, and they came and stood before Pharaoh. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed dreams, and there is none to interpret them. And they said unto the king, Relate your dreams to your servants, and let us hear them. And the king related his dreams to them, and they all answered and said with one voice to the king, May the king live forever, and this is the interpretation of your dreams. The 7 good kine which you did see denote 7 daughters that will be born unto you in the latter days. And the 7 kine which you saw come up after them, and swallow them up, are for a sign that the daughters who will be born unto you will all die in the lifetime of the king. And that which you did see in the second dream of 7 full good ears of grain came up upon one stalk. This is their interpretation, that you will build unto yourself in the latter days 7 cities throughout the land of Mithraim. And that which you saw of the 7 blasted ears of grain springing up after them, and swallowing them up while you did behold them with your eyes, is for a sign that the cities which you will build will all be destroyed in the latter days, in the lifetime of the king. And when they spoke these words, the king did not incline his ear to their words, neither did he fix his heart upon them. For the king knew in his wisdom that they did not give a proper interpretation of the dreams. And when they had finished speaking before the king answered them, saying, What is this thing that you have spoken unto me? Surely you have uttered falsehood and spoken lies. Therefore now give the proper interpretation of my dreams, that you may not die. And the king answered after this, and he sent and called again for other wise men, and they came and stood before the king. And the king related his dreams to them. And they all answered him according to the first interpretation. And the king's anger was kindled, and he was very wroth. And the king said unto them, Surely you speak lies and utter falsehood in what you have said. And the king commanded that a proclamation should be issued throughout the land of Mitzrayim, saying, It is resolved by the king and his great men that any wise man who knows and understands the interpretation of dreams and will not come this day before the king, he shall die. And the man that will declare unto the king the proper interpretation of his dreams, there shall be given unto him all that he will require from the king. And all the wise men of the land of Mitzrayim came before the king, together with all the magicians and the sorcerers that were in Mitzrayim, and in Goshen, and in Ramesses, and in Takfarach, and in Zoar, and in all the places of the borders of Mitzrayim. And they all stood before the king. And all the nobles, and the princes, and all the attendants belonging to the king, came together from all the cities of Mitzrayim. And they all sat before the king. And the king related his dreams before the wise men, and the princes, and all that sat before the king were astonished at the vision. And all the wise men who were before the king were greatly divided in their interpretation of his dreams. Some of them interpret them to the king, saying, The 7 kine are 7 kings, who from the king's issue will be raised over Mizraim. And the 7 bad kine are 7 princes, who will stand up against them in the latter days and destroy them. And the 7 ears of grain are the 7 great princes belonging to Mitzrayim, who will fall in the hands of the 7 less powerful princes of their enemies, in the wars of our Adonai the king. And some of them interpreted to the king in this manner, saying, The 7 good kine are the strong cities of Mitzrayim, and the 7 bad kine are the 7 nations of the land of Canaan, who will come against the 7 cities of Mitzrayim in the latter days, and destroy them. And that which you saw in the second dream of the 7 good and bad ears of grain is a sign that the government of Mitzrayim will again return to your seed as at first. And in his reign, the people of the cities of Mitzrayim will turn against the 7 cities of Canaan, who are stronger than they are, and will destroy them, and the government of Mitzrayim will return to your seed. And some of them said unto the king, This is the interpretation of your dreams. The 7 good kine are 7 queens, whom you will take for women in the latter days. And the 7 bad kine denote that those women will all die in the lifetime of the king. And the 7 good and bad ears of grain which you did see in the second dream are 14 children. And it will be in the latter days that they will stand up and fight against themselves, and 7 of them will smite the 7 that are more powerful. And some of them said these words unto the king, The 7 good kine denote that 7 children will be born unto you, and they will slay 7 of your children's children in the latter days. And the 7 good ears of grain which you did see in this second dream are those princes against whom 7 other less powerful princes will fight and destroy them in the latter days, and avenge your children's cause, and the government will again return to your seed. And the king heard all the words of the wise men of Mitzrayim and their interpretation of his dreams, and none of them pleased the king. And the king knew in his wisdom that they did not altogether speak correctly in all these words. For this was from Yahuwah to frustrate the words of the wise men of Mitzrayim, in order that Joseph might go forth from the house of confinement, and in order that he should become great in Mitzrayim. And the king saw that none amongst all the wise men and magicians of Mitzrayim spoke correctly to him, and the king's wrath was kindled, and his anger burned within him. And the king commanded that all the wise men and magicians should go out from before him, and they all went out from before the king with shame and disgrace. And the king commanded that a proclamation be sent throughout Mitzrayim to slay all the magicians that were in Mitzrayim, and not one of them should be suffered to live. And the captains of the guards belonging to the king rose up, and each man drew his sword, and they began to smite the magicians of Mitzrayim and the wise men. And after this Merad, chief butler to the king, came and bowed down before the king and sat before him. And the butler said to the king, "May the king live forever, and his government be exalted in the land. You were angry with your servant in those days, now 2 years past, and did place me in the ward. And I was for some time in the ward, I and the chief of the bakers. And there was with us an Ivri servant, belonging to the captain of the guard. His name was Joseph, for his Adonai had been angry with him and placed him in the house of confinement, and he attended us there. And then some time after, when we were in the ward, we dreamed dreams in one night. I and the chief of the bakers, we dreamed, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And we came in the morning and told them to that servant, and he interpreted to us our dreams, to each man according to his dream. Did he correctly interpret? And it came to pass as he interpreted to us, so was the event. There fell not to the ground any of his words. And now therefore, my Adonai and king, do not slay the people of Mitzrayim for naught. Behold, that slave is still confined in the house by the captain of the guard, his Adonai, in the house of confinement. If it pleases the king, let him send for him, that he may come before you, and he will make known to you the correct interpretation of the dream which you did dream." And the king heard the words of the chief butler, and the king ordered that the wise men of Mitzrayim should not be slain. And the king ordered his servants to bring Joseph before him. And the king said unto them, "Go to him, and do not terrify him, lest he be confused, and will not know to speak properly." And the servants of the king went to Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And the king's servants shaved him, and he changed his prison garment, and he came before the king. And the king was sitting upon his royal throne in a priestly dress girt around with a gold ephod, and the fine gold which was upon it sparkled, and the carbuncle, and the ruby, and the emerald, together with all the precious stones that were upon the king's head, dazzled the eye, and Joseph wondered greatly at the king. And the throne upon which the king sat was covered with gold and silver, and with onyx stones, and it had 70 steps. And it was their custom throughout the land of Mitzrayim that every man who came to speak to the king, if he was a prince or one that was estimable in the sight of the king, he ascended to the king's throne as far as the 31st step, and the king would descend to the 36th step and speak with him. If one was of the common people, he ascended to the 3rd step, and the king would descend to the 4th and speak to him. And their custom was, moreover, that any man who understood to speak in all 70 languages, he ascended to the 70 steps and went and spoke till he reached the king. And any man who could not complete the 70, he ascended as many steps as the languages he knew to speak in. And it was customary in those days in Mitzrayim that no one should reign over them, but who understood to speak in the 70 languages. And when Joseph came before the king, he bowed down to the ground before the king, and he ascended to the 3rd step. And the king sat upon the 4th step and spoke with Joseph. And the king said unto Joseph, I dreamed a dream, and there was no interpreter to interpret it properly. And I commanded this day that all the magicians of Mizraim and the wise men thereof should come before me, and I related my dreams to them, and no one has properly interpreted them to me. And after this, I this day heard concerning you that you are a wise man and can correctly interpret every dream that you hear. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, Let Pharaoh relate his dreams that he dreamed. Surely the interpretation belongs to Yahuwah. And Pharaoh related his dreams to Joseph, the dream of the kine, and the dream of the ears of grain. And the king left off speaking. And Joseph was then clothed with the Ruach Yahuwah before the king, and he knew all the things that would befall the king from that day forward, and he knew the proper interpretation of the king's dream, and he spoke before the king. And Joseph found favor in the sight of the king, and the king inclined his ears and his heart, and he heard all the words of Joseph. And Joseph said unto the king, Do not imagine that they are two dreams, for it is only one dream. For that which Yahuwah has chosen to do throughout the land he has shown to the king in his dream, and this is the proper interpretation of your dream. The 7 good kine and ears of grain are 7 years, and the 7 bad kine and ears of grain are also 7 years. It is one dream. Behold, the 7 years that are coming, there will be a great plenty throughout the land. And after that, the 7 years of famine will follow them, a very grievous famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten from the land, and the famine will consume the inhabitants of the land. The king dreamed one dream, and the dream was therefore repeated unto Pharaoh, because the thing is established by Yahuwah, and Yahuwah will shortly bring it to pass. Now therefore I will give you counsel, and deliver your soul and the souls of the inhabitants of the land from the evil of the famine, that you seek throughout your kingdom for a man very discreet and wise, who knows all the affairs of government, and appoint him to superintend over the land of Mitzrayim. And let the man whom you place over Mitzrayim appoint officers under him, that they gather in all the food of the good years that are coming, and let them lay up grain and deposit it in your appointed stores. And let them keep that food for 7 years of famine, that it may be found for you and your people and your whole land, and that you and your land be not cut off by the famine. Let all the inhabitants of the land be also ordered that they gather in, every man, the produce of his field, of all sorts of food, during the 7 good years, and that they place it in their stores, that it may be found for them in the days of the famine, and that they may live upon it. This is the proper interpretation of your dream, and this is the counsel given to save your soul and the souls of all your subjects. And the king answered and said unto Joseph, Who says and who knows that your words are correct? And he said unto the king, This shall be a sign for you respecting all my words, that they are true, and that my advice is good for you. Behold, your woman sits this day upon the stool of delivery, and she will bear you a son, and you will rejoice with him. When your child shall have gone forth from his mother's womb, your firstborn son that has been born these 2 years back shall die, and you will be comforted in the child that will be born unto you this day. And Joseph finished speaking these words to the king, and he bowed down to the king and went out. And when Joseph had gone out from the king's presence, those signs which Joseph had spoken unto the king came to pass on that day. And the queen bore a son on that day, and the king heard the good news about his son, and he rejoiced. And when the reporter had gone forth from the king's presence, the king's servants found the firstborn son of the king fallen dead upon the ground. And there was a great lamentation and noise in the king's house. And the king heard it, and he said, What is the noise and lamentation that I have heard in the house? And they told the king that his firstborn son had died. Then the king knew that all Joseph's words that he had spoken were correct. And the king was consoled for his son by the child that was born to him on that day, as Joseph had spoken. Chapter 49. And these things the king sent and assembled all his officers and servants, and all the princes and nobles belonging to the king. And they all came before the king. And the king said unto them, Behold, you have seen and heard all the words of this Ivri man, and all the signs which he declared would come to pass. And not any of his words have fallen to the ground. You know that he has given a proper interpretation of the dream, and it will surely come to pass. Now therefore take counsel, and know what you will do, and how the land will be delivered from the famine. Seek now and see whether the light can be found, in whose heart there is wisdom and knowledge, and I will appoint him over the land. For you have heard this to save the land therewith from the famine, and I know that the land will not be delivered from the famine, but with the advice of the Ivri man, him that advised me. And they all answered the king and said, The counsel which the Ivri has given concerning this is good. Now therefore, our Adonai and king, behold, the whole land is in your hand. Do that which seems good in your sight. Him whom you choose, and whom you in your wisdom know to be wise, and capable of delivering the land with his wisdom, him shall the king appoint to be under him over the land. And the king said to all the officers, I have thought that since Yahuwah has made known to the Ivri man all that he has spoken, there is none so discreet and wise in the whole land as he is. If it seems good in your sight, I will place him over the land, for he will save the land with his wisdom. And all the officers answered the king and said, But surely it is written in the laws of Mitzrayim, and it should not be violated, that no man shall reign over Mitzrayim, nor be second to the king, but one who has knowledge in all the languages of the sons of men. Now therefore, our Adonai and king, behold, this Ivri man can only speak the Ivrit language. And how then can he be over us the second under government, a man who not even knows our language? Now we pray you send for him, and let him come before you, and prove him in all things, and do as you see fit. And the king said, It shall be done tomorrow, and the thing you have spoken is good. And all the officials came on that day before the king. And on that night Yahuwah sent one of his ministering angels, and he came into the land of Mizraim unto Joseph, and the counsel of Yahuwah stood over Joseph. And behold, Joseph was lying in the bed at night in his Adonai's house in the dungeon, for his Adonai had put him back into the dungeon on account of his woman. And the angel roused him from his sleep, and Joseph rose up and stood upon his legs. And behold, the angel of Yahuwah was standing opposite to him. And the angel of Yahuwah spoke with Joseph, and he taught him all the languages of man in that night. And he called his name Yehuseph. And the angel of Yahuwah went from him. And Joseph returned and lay upon his bed. And Joseph was astonished at the vision which he saw. And it came to pass in the morning that the king sent for all his officers and servants. And they all came and sat before the king. And the king ordered Joseph to be brought. And the king's servants went and brought Joseph before Pharaoh. And the king came forth and ascended the steps of the throne. And Joseph spoke unto the king in all languages. And Joseph went up to him and spoke unto the king, until he arrived before the king in the 70th step. And he sat before the king. And the king greatly rejoiced on account of Joseph. And all the king's officers rejoiced greatly with the king when they heard all the words of Joseph. And the thing seemed good in the sight of the king and the officers to appoint Joseph to be second to the king over the whole land of Mitzrayim. And the king spoke to Joseph, saying, Now you did give me counsel to appoint a wise man over the land of Mitzrayim, in order with his wisdom to save the land from the famine. Now therefore, since Yahuwah has made all this known to you, and all the words which you have spoken, there is not throughout the land a discreet and wise man like unto you. And your name no more shall be called Joseph, but Zonath Panak shall be your name. You shall be second to me, and according to your words shall be all the affairs of my government. And at your words shall my people go out and come in. Also from under your hand shall my servants and officers receive their salary, which is given to them monthly. and to you shall all the people of the land bow down. Only in my throne will I be greater than you." And the king took off his ring from his hand and put it upon the hand of Joseph. And the king dressed Joseph in a princely garment, and he put a golden crown upon his head, and he put a golden chain upon his neck. And the king commanded his servants, and they made him ride in the second chariot belonging to the king, that went opposite to the king's chariot. And he caused him to ride upon a great and strong horse from the king's horses, and to be conducted through the streets of the land of Mizraim. And the king commanded that all those that played upon timbrels, harps, and other musical instruments should go forth with Joseph. 1,000 timbrels, 1,000 mekaloth, 1,000 nebalim went after him, and 5,000 men with drawn swords glittering in their hands, and they went marching and playing before Joseph. And 20,000 of the great men of the king, girt with belts of skin, covered with gold, marched at the right hand of Joseph, and 20,000 at his left. And all the women and damsels went upon the roofs or stood in the streets playing and rejoicing at Joseph, and gazed at the appearance of Joseph, and at his beauty. And the king's people went before him and behind him, perfuming the road with frankincense, and with cassia, and with all sorts of fine perfume, and scattered myrrh and aloes along the road. And 20 men proclaimed these words before him throughout the land with a loud voice: "Do you see this man whom the king has chosen to be his second? All the affairs of government shall be regulated by him. And he that transgresses his orders, or that does not bow down before him to the ground, shall die. For he rebels against the king and his second." And when the heralds had ceased proclaiming, all the people of Mizraim bowed down to the ground before Joseph and said, "May the king live, also may his second live." And all the inhabitants of Mizraim bowed down along the road. And when the heralds approached them, they bowed down, and they rejoiced with all sorts of timbrels, Michal and Tabal before Joseph. And Joseph upon his horse lifted up his eyes to heaven, and called out and said, "He raises the poor from the dust. He lifts up the needy from the dunghill. O Yahuwah Sabaoth, happy is the man who trusts in you." And Joseph passed throughout the land of Mizraim with Pharaoh's servants and officers, and they showed him the whole land of Mizraim and all the king's treasures. And Joseph returned and came on that day before Pharaoh. And the king gave unto Joseph a possession in the land of Mizraim, a possession of fields and vineyards. And the king gave unto Joseph 3,000 talents of silver, and 1,000 talents of gold, and onyx stones, and bdellium, and many gifts. And on the next day the king commanded all the people of Mizraim to bring unto Joseph offerings and gifts, and that he that violated the command of the king should die. And they made a high place in the street of the city, and they spread out garments there. And whosoever brought anything to Joseph put it into the high place. And all the people of Mizraim cast something into the high place, one man a gold earring, the other rings and earrings, and different vessels of gold and silver work, and onyx stones, and bdellium did he cast upon the high place. Every one gave something of what he possessed. And Joseph took all these and placed them in his treasures. And all the officers and nobles belonging to the king exalted Joseph, and they gave him many gifts, seeing that the king had chosen him to be his second. And the king sent to Potipharah, the son of Achiram, priest of On, and he took his young daughter Asenath, and gave her unto Joseph for a woman. And the damsel was very comely, a virgin, one whom man had not known. And Joseph took her for a woman. And the king said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and beside you none shall dare to lift up his hand or his foot to regulate my people throughout the land of Mizraim. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh. And Joseph went out from before the king, and he became the king's second in Mizraim. And the king gave Joseph 100 servants to attend him in his house. And Joseph also sent and purchased many servants, and they remained in the house of Joseph. Joseph then built for himself a very magnificent house, like unto the houses of kings, before the court of the king's palace. And he made in the house a large temple, very elegant in appearance, and convenient for his residence. 3 years was Joseph in erecting his house. And Joseph made unto himself a very elegant throne of abundance, of gold and silver, and he covered it with onyx stones and bdellium. And he made upon it the likeness of the whole land of Mizraim, and the likeness of the river of Mizraim that waters the whole land of Mizraim. And Joseph sat securely upon his throne in his house, and Yahuwah increased Joseph's wisdom. And all the inhabitants of Mizraim, and Pharaoh's servants and his princes loved Joseph exceedingly, for this thing was from Yahuwah to Joseph. And Joseph had an army that made war, going out in hosts and troops to the number of 40,600 men, capable of bearing arms to assist the king and Joseph against the enemy, besides the king's officers and his servants and inhabitants of Mizraim without number. And Joseph gave unto his mighty men and to all his hosts shields and javelins, and caps and coats of mail, and stones for slinging. Chapter 50. At that time the children of Tarshish came against the sons of Ishmael, and made war with them. And the children of Tarshish spoiled the Ishmaelim for a long time. And the children of Ishmael were small in number in those days, and they could not prevail over the children of Tarshish, and they were sorely oppressed. And the old men of the Ishmaelim sent a record to the king of Mizraim, saying, Send, I pray you, unto your servants, officers and hosts, to help us to fight against the children of Tarshish, for we have been consuming away for a long time. And Pharaoh sent Joseph with the mighty men and hosts which were with him, and also his mighty men from the king's house. And they went to the land of Cavilah, to the children of Ishmael, to assist them against the children of Tarshish. And the children of Ishmael fought with the children of Tarshish, and smote the Tarshishim, and subdued all their land, and the children of Ishmael dwell therein unto this day. And when the land of Tarshish was subdued, all the Tarshishim ran away, and came on the border of their brethren of the children of Yavin. And Joseph with all his mighty men and hosts returned to Mizraim, not one of them missing. And at the revolution of the year, in the 2nd year of Joseph reigning over Mizraim, Yahuwah gave great plenty throughout the land for 7 years, as Joseph had spoken. For Yahuwah blessed all the produce of the earth in those days for 7 years. And they ate and were greatly satisfied. And Joseph at that time had officers under him, and they collected all the food of the good years, and heaped grain year by year, and they placed it in the treasuries of Joseph. And at any time when they gathered the food, Joseph commanded that they should bring the grain in the ears, and also bring with it some of the spoil of the field, that it should not spoil. And Joseph did according to this year by year, and he heaped up grain like the sand of the sea for abundance, for his stores were immense, and could not be numbered for abundance. And also all the inhabitants of Mizraim gathered all sorts of food in their stores in great abundance during the 7 good years, but they did not do unto as Joseph did. And all the food which Joseph and the Mizraim had gathered during the 7 years of plenty was secured for the land in stores for the 7 years of famine, for the support of the whole land. And all the inhabitants of Mizraim filled each man his store, and he concealed place with grain, to be for support during the famine. And Joseph placed all the food that he had gathered in all the cities of Mizraim, and he closed all the stores, and placed sentinels over them. And Joseph's woman Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, bore him 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and Joseph was 34 years old when he begat them. And the lads grew up, and they went in his ways, and in his instructions. They did not deviate from the way which their father taught them, either to the right or left. And Yahuwah was with the lads, and they grew up, and had understanding and skill in all wisdom and all of the affairs of government. And all the king's officers and his great men of the inhabitants of Mizraim exalted the lads, and they were brought up amongst the king's children. And the 7 years of plenty that were throughout the land were at end, and the 7 years of famine came after them as Joseph had spoken, and the famine was throughout the land. And all the people of Mizraim saw that the famine had commenced in the land of Mizraim, and all the people of Mizraim opened their stores of grain, for the famine prevailed over them. And they found all the food that was in their stores full of vermin, and not fit to eat, and the famine prevailed throughout the land. And all the inhabitants of Mizraim came and cried before Pharaoh, for the famine was heavy upon them. And they said unto Pharaoh, Give food unto your servants, and wherefore shall we die through hunger before your eyes, even we and our little ones? And Pharaoh answered them, saying, And wherefore do you cry unto me? Did not Joseph command that the grain should be laid up during the 7 years of plenty for the years of famine? And wherefore did you not hearken to his voice? And the people of Mizraim answered the king, saying, As your soul lives, our Adonai, your servants have done all that Joseph ordered, for your servants also gathered in all the produce of their fields during the 7 years of plenty, and laid it in the stores unto this day. And when the famine prevailed over your servants, we opened our stores, and behold, all our produce was filled with vermin, and was not fit for food. And when the king heard all that had befallen the inhabitants of Mizraim, the king was greatly afraid on account of the famine, and he was much terrified. And the king answered the people of Mizraim, saying, Since all this has happened unto you, go unto Joseph, do whatsoever he shall say unto you. Transgress not his commands. And all the people of Mizraim went forth and came unto Joseph, and said unto him, Give unto us food, and wherefore shall we die before you through hunger? For we gathered in our produce during the 7 years, as you did command, and we put it in store, and has thus it befallen us. And when Joseph heard all the words of the people of Mizraim, and what had befallen them, Joseph opened all his stores of the produce, and he sold it unto the people of Mizraim. And the famine prevailed throughout the land, and the famine was in all countries. But in the land of Mizraim there was produce for sale. And all the inhabitants of Mizraim came unto Joseph to buy grain, for the famine prevailed over them, and all their grain was spoiled. And Joseph daily sold it to all the people of Mizraim. And all the inhabitants of the land of Canaan, and of Palestine, and those beyond the Jordan, and the children of the east, and all the cities of the lands far and near, heard that there was grain in Mizraim, and they all came to Mizraim to buy grain, for the famine prevailed over them. And Joseph opened the stores of grain, and placed officers over them, and they daily stood and sold to all that came. And Joseph knew that his brethren also would come to Mizraim to buy grain, for the famine prevailed throughout the earth. And Joseph commanded all his people that they should cause it to be proclaimed throughout the land of Mizraim, saying, It is the pleasure of the king and his second, and of their great men, that any person who wishes to buy grain in Mizraim shall not send his servants to Mizraim to purchase, but his sons, and also any Mitzri or Canaanite, who shall come from any of the stores from buying grain in Mizraim, and shall go and sell it throughout the land. He shall die, for no one shall buy but for the support of his household. And any man leading 2 or 3 beasts shall die, for a man shall only lead his own beast. And Joseph placed sentinels at the gates of Mizraim, and commanded them, saying, Any person who may come to buy grain, suffer him not to enter until his name and the name of his father and the name of his father's father be written down. And whatsoever is written by day, send their names unto me in the evening, that I may know their names. And Joseph placed officers throughout the land of Mizraim, and he commanded them to do all these things. And Joseph did all these things, and he made these statutes in order that he might know when his brethren should come to Mitzrayim to buy grain. And Joseph's people caused it daily to be proclaimed in Mitzrayim according to these words and statutes which Joseph had commanded. And all the inhabitants of the east and west country and all of the earth heard of the statutes and regulations which Joseph had enacted in Mitzrayim. And the inhabitants of the extreme parts of the earth came, and they bought grain in Mitzrayim day after day, and then they went away. And all the officers of Mitzrayim did as Joseph had commanded. And all that came to Mitzrayim to buy grain, the gatekeepers would write their names and their fathers' names, and daily bring them in the evening before Joseph. This concludes the reading of chapters 46 through 50 of the book or Cepher of Yashar. Okay, fam, there is a lot going on in this. One of the things I just want to point out real quick is it just hit me for the first time. I don't know why it never dawned on me before. But the funny thing is, I thought it was always interesting that Pharaoh changed Joseph's name and gave him obviously a Mitzri name. And also that makes sense why his brothers, not only when they saw him, didn't recognize him, probably because he had no hair on him compared to them, which would have had, the locks, I would assume, and the beard, where he probably had no hair at all because the Mitzri don't do hair. But also with his name change as well. So as obviously he was famous throughout the land and parts of the earth, especially because of this famine, that they would have said the second and they would have said his name, but obviously it would not have clicked for his brothers and obviously for Yashar or his father, Yaakov as well. But just a thought. I don't know if that ever dawned on you all, but that was kind of like a mind-blown moment for me. There's just a few things I just want to highlight real quick that I took note of, but obviously I pray that this has been a blessing of the reading for you all. I just wrote down chapter 46 was something that was real interesting to just maybe you want to go back and reflect on if you haven't already. Chapter 46, verse 19 to 20, just pointing out that Yahuwah punished Joseph for trusting in man, so he had to wait another 2 years before the butler even recalled him and told Pharaoh, about how he interpreted his dream, right? And then by chapter 47, I wrote down verse 19. He's the choosing, the reminder of Abraham and Lot, where, Lot was able to choose, remember when they had the issue with their herdsmen and they were fighting over, space with the neighboring nation. And so Abraham was like, look, just choose what land do you want, and just take your herd, your family, everything that is yours, and let's just separate so there's no more issue between us. And so ultimately Lot was able to choose, right? And but obviously Yahuwah promised Abraham the land, not Lot, but Abraham was gracious enough to let Lot choose. I thought that was interesting. So here it is. We get to chapter 47. Yashar has died, and now his sons are inheriting his possessions, and they were supposed to split everything 50-50. But I thought it was interesting that Yaakov was like, wait a minute, there's a promise of the land, and so he just basically says, hey, brother Esau, choose. Do you want the possessions our father has left behind, or do you want the promise of the land? And we know from reading Yashar as well as Yehovalim and anything else that Yahuwah promised this land not only to Abraham, not only to Yashar, but to Yaakov and his descendants. The promises was for Yashar, no other nation or no other descendant per se that came from the seed of Abraham, let alone from Yashar. It was set as, what I mean is the inheritance was set aside through Yashar, through Yaakov. Okay, hopefully you're following me what I'm saying with that. So I just took note of that. I thought it was interesting, just the parallelism with Abraham and Lot. And then now here it is. It's Yaakov and Esau. And you see, the righteous are fair. Abraham, righteous. Yaakov, righteous. Where Lot or Esau, we don't ever read about them worshiping Yahuwah, setting up an altar, and just really acknowledging. And we know, especially with Esau, he was given the opportunity to study and learn Yah's ways, and he turned that down. He was so not even interested. And we know that Yaakov went away for a long time and was with, I believe he was with Shem as well as Eber, amongst his forefathers, to learn the ways of Yahuwah. And, for food for thought, if you do know the exact chapters in Yashar as an example, please post it in chat. And if there's any correction needed, please do so. But I really believe it was Shem and Eber he was with. And also, I thought in chapter 47, what was interesting, I think it's by verse 20, that Esau went to Nebaioth, Ishmael's son, to seek consultation on what should I do? Should I take the goods, that my father left behind, or should I take the land? And keep in mind, these, interesting enough, were of the firstborn. Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn. Esau was Yashak's firstborn. But ironically, it's the secondborn that's getting the inheritance. So Yashak ultimately gets the inheritance over Ishmael. And then here it is, Yaakov getting the inheritance over Esau, right? So I just thought it was interesting that he should go to his uncle, cousin, to get consultation, but the cousin is of the firstborn. And then the other thing I want to point out with chapter 47 is verse 27 mentions the Girgashim. I don't have it in front of me right now, but you can find it, I think, in at least 2 to 3 books, whether it's Matthew, Marcus or Mark, or Luke, possibly Yochanan or John. But I think it's at least 3 where about the man, the story where the stormy waters and the boat is sinking, and they're like, Yahusha, we're about to die. What are you doing? Why are you sleeping? And then ultimately, Yahusha causes the wind and waves to cease. But what happens is they get to the land, and it turns out that land was of the Girgashim. And that's where they meet the man. One of the books talks about it's just a man with legion, with many ruachoth or spirits within him. And then another book talks about, and if you do remember those books, please put it in the comments. There were 2 men that Yahusha came across that were demon filled. But when I was reading that a while back, as I was meditating on my own storms of life, and reminded that, why are you tripping, Tina? Because Yahusha is in the boat with you. If Yahusha is in the boat with you, even when the storm's a storm and life is life, and when he is in the boat with you, if he is not tripping, if he is not freaking out, if he is not concerned, why should I or why should you be concerned? You just got to go through it, because once you get through the storm, there is something waiting on the other side. In this case, it was this man that was filled with these spirits. But I say all this to say, and circling back to verse 27 of chapter 47, is that the Girgashim, this is the land where the man that was filled with legion, this was the territory he was in. Ironically enough, and obviously this is territory that we know from the book of Joshua, or the Cepher of Yahusha. This is the territory that Yashar was able to take or conquer, if you will. And this is the same territory. And ironically enough, the swine was there, those pigs were there. And so that's when Legion, or the Ruachoth, the spirit, was saying, hey, look, okay, I know you want to deliver him, but can we go into those swine? And remember, the swine, they were so crazed that they ended up running into the body of water. And what happened to them? They drowned. But keep in mind, this is territory that belongs to Yashar. Why are they herding swine versus regular cattle. Just think about that. But I thought it was interesting that Girgashim got the shout out. Last thing in chapter 47, verse 30. Esau chose, that I took note of, was that end of the day, Esau chose things that were not eternal, like the gold, the silver, the servants, whatever. Everything that Esau chose wasn't eternal, was not going to last forever. And so it just showed his lack of disbelief in the prophecy of the inheritance of the land, whereas by verse 33, Yaakov chose and recorded the eternal inheritance. Yaakov did not play. He put everything in writing. We know this when Esau gave up his birthright. He didn't value that either, right? And here it is, the eternal, like land is eternal. You can't get rid of land, But Yaakov chose what was eternal. He wrote it down, but also keep in mind, this was prophesied that they would inherit this land. So I just want to point out Yaakov's belief. He believed what was said. He believed Yah, right? Chapter 48. This is where the interpretation of dreams happens. So this is where Joseph basically interprets Pharaoh's dreams and says, look, there's going to be 7 years of famine. I have taken forever to get back started in reading the book of Yashar so we can finally finish it in the next month or two. And I think it's ironic, and I don't think it's a coincidence. That's how I want to say it, that we're reading it right now. Look at everything that's going on in the world right now on a spiritual level, not just physically or what the news is reporting, but what in the spirit that's happening. And I want to ask you, are you prepared? Not just physically, do you have things stored up in your house? So when food supply does get really, really low, and right now we're experiencing incredible inflation, so you're having to look at your budget. You're having to be mindful of what you're spending at the grocery store. And also, even if the price is somewhat close to what it was before, you're not getting as much as you were getting before for that same price. So they have made things smaller. So you have less financial to work with because the price is more, and you're getting less to work with if what is provided for that price. But more importantly, have you been preparing spiritually? That is what's been important. Are you ready? Have you been building, that's how I want to say it, have you been building the muscle to trust Yahuwah during a famine? Have you been building the muscle to trust Yahuwah in the midst of adversity going on, in the midst of trials, in the midst of a job loss, in the midst of persecution, in the midst of whatever is happening to you right now? Because we already know more is to come, right? But it's just not a coincidence we're reading about this right now. So please, don't let there be a famine in the word in your household. I'm going to repeat that again. Don't let there be a famine of the word in your household. So continue to stock up your food as best as you can. Manage your money as well as you can. But make sure you are feeding your ruach, your spirit, and filling up with Yahuwah's word so you can endure to the end. Moving on to chapter 49, I just want to highlight Joseph's promotion and how this chapter was so detailed in the backstory as compared to the book of Genesis or Bereshit. So just as a reminder that we have to trust Yahuwah's process. Joseph was in confinement for 12 years until he was 30, right? And we already know Yahuwah gave him dreams, and then obviously the gift to interpret dreams. And then it made me think about Yahusha. Yahusha didn't come into the call until he was 30. And ironically, Joseph didn't come into his call until he was 30. So there's a process in this, even, and funny enough, in the midst of all that, in the process, Yahusha was going into the temples and he was teaching, and Joseph was interpreting dreams, but also he was favored when he was when he was a slave, and he was also favored when he was in prison. But all that is process, and process leads to promotion, and we have to be prepared for our purpose. Yah has a calling on our lives. We have purpose, even with sharing the Basor, the good news. So anything that we do, it leads to that purpose, right? So how are you being prepared? What is the process you're going through? The process right now may be feeling like persecution. It may be feeling like, what just happened? I don't understand why I'm going through all this. But in the midst of the things that you're going through, obviously to rejoice in the trial, because it produces patience, and patience a perfect work, that you are perfect and complete, lacking nothing. And that is what happened with Joseph, that he went through the trials. And we know, and just keep in mind, before I forget, check out the playlist for the Testament of Joseph. If you haven't already, listen to it. If you have, listen to it again. Because we see how in the midst of the test of lust, obviously with the wife continuing to come at him to try to sleep with him, he resisted. And he had to just be pure in mind and fast and pray and hold on to his chastity until the point of when he finally was married, right? But end of the day, he had to endure. He had to get through it, and he had to rejoice in the trials too, right? And I think lastly, as I just kind of close up here, chapter 50, to wrap it up, I want to say that what came to mind to summarize this chapter was obviously Joseph's prophetic word was confirmed. I think about a lot of people, I call them YouTube influencers at this point, that will prophesy. I had a dream. This is the dream, or I have a prophetic word. This is what thus says God, or thus says Yahuwah. But how many of those prophecies are coming to pass? And what I want to encourage you all in is we can see here with Joseph that not only did he interpret the dream, but also there was a quick confirmation that came with it. Like, this is what will happen to, because obviously Pharaoh's like, well, how do I know what you're saying is true? And Joseph said, well, this is what will happen. And obviously what would happen was going to be immediate. And he got the evidence immediately. And then what was also great to see is that the people, not only did Pharaoh put his trust in him, but the people also were diligent in storing food as well to prepare for the famine. But as Yahuwah would have it, I think that if they had stored it up, Joseph would have never been able to do what he was able to do. And obviously Yahuwah get the glory, because if their food was still good, things would not have passed the way that they did. And so I just truly believe Yahuwah caused the vermin to go in and just eat up the food, so that everybody had to come to Joseph, had to go through Joseph. And just it's amazing. So, but I think, Joseph was prepared. He went through the process. He was prepared for his assignment, and he did his assignment well. But ultimately, take the time to just really think about this and ask Yahuwah, like, how is what we're reading right now, how is it applicable to this moment? And how can you prepare? How can you prepare spiritually? And how can you prepare physically for your household? And how can you prepare even for his call on your life? Hallelujah. If you're new to the channel, welcome. As I've already shared, feel free to go to the playlist to listen to any of the previous chapters that you have missed. And also there is in the live section, but also I've saved it under the playlist. We have read in the last few months, the testaments of the 12 patriarchs. And there's so many lessons to learn from them and glean as you are learning how to walk in truth, how to live set apart. We have examples, and we have, just some gems, some wisdom that they've left behind for us. In addition to other books, the Torah, if you're interested in reading any of the books of any of the prophets, they're there. I've already recorded them. Amongst other books that have that were taken out of the, original Bible, the Apocrypha books, if you will. If you've been rocking me for a while, thank you so much for your continued support and love and prayers. So with that said, until the next reading, Anea Habata, I love you. Yahuwah Barakatah, Yahuwah bless you. Shalom.